Lines produce shape. A shape is a two-dimensional form. In art, shapes occupy an area with identifiable boundaries. Regular shapes are geometric. We have names for many regular shapes such as circle, square, triangle, hexagon, etc. Irregular shapes are unique and have no simple defining names. Irregular shapes are often organic or biomorphic in that they resemble living things. Outlines can define shapes, and so can areas of color or value changes. Geometric shapes are regular and precise. They may be made up of straight, rectilinear, or curvilinear lines, but they have a mathematical appearance. Much of the terminology of shape is familiar from geometry: circle, square, rectangle, oval, etc. On the other hand, irregular shapes are described as organic or biomorphic and are therefore fluid and curvy. Let's examine geometric shapes in art. David Smith explored the relationship among diverse geometric shapes such as cylinders, cubes, and discs in his Cubi-8 sculpture. This sculpture represents nothing found in nature. These shapes are abstract geometric concepts rendered in steel. They appear hard and unyielding, whereas Elizabeth Murray's Tangled Fall resembles a human organ or some other type of living entity. Tangled Fall, which is made with shaped canvas and wood, juts out from the wall and so blurs the line between painting and sculpture. This work is said to have a biomorphic shape. That is, it has the form of a biological entity. Rather than having strictly defined shapes whose boundaries are unyielding, biomorphic shapes seem to ebb and flow, expand and contract, or transform as directed by some inner life force. Tangled Fall is reminiscent of any number of bodily organs. The interlacing tubes are reminiscent of veins and capillaries. Amorphous shapes are without clear shape or form, like Bayside by Helen Frankenthaler. Here we see strong abstract and gestural swaths of color that are irregularly shaped with no clearly delineated boundaries. Volume and mass. Shape also includes volume and mass. The terms mass and volume tend to be used interchangeably in speaking about three-dimensional arts, such as sculpture and architecture. Mass is a solid form that takes up real space. Volume takes up space, but may contain space as well as a building does. Mass is always solid. Volume, on the other hand, can be both solid and hollow. Simply, the mass of an object refers to its bulk. For example, the Holocaust Memorial in Vienna by Rachel Whitered has bulk. The memorial is made of concrete and weighs 250 tons. Whitered is an artist who is interested in interior spaces, and so her memorial, which honors the destruction of the Austrian Jewish community in the Second World War, is an inverted library. The books protrude on the outside, in recognition of the significance of study to the Jewish people, the people of the book. But the doors of this library are shut. The names of the places to which the country's Jews were deported for annihilation are described in alphabetical order around the exterior. There is murder, death, and loss here, and the massiveness of the memorial shapes a sense of gloom that cannot be literally or figuratively lifted. Positive and negative shapes, figure ground. To understand positive-negative shapes and figure ground concepts, let's examine a Rubin vase and its psychological illusions it produces. What do you see here? Do you see the profiles of two heads or a vase? Notice how the image fluctuates between the two possibilities, even though the image on your retina remains constant. It is difficult to perceive both meaningful images simultaneously. When we see the profiles of the two heads, they become the figure, the positive space, and the black area becomes the ground, meaning the background. and so another name for background is the negative space. When we focus on the black vase, the white becomes the background, the negative space, and the black area, the vase, now becomes the figure. Light and value. All the visual elements are essential, but perhaps none is more important than light. Light is the basis for vision and thus necessary for arts. Light is electromagnetic energy that in certain wavelengths stimulate the eyes and brain. Light is at the very core of the visual arts. Without light, there is no art. In two-dimensional art, artists use value, which is light and dark variation on a surface. The value of a color of a surface is its lightness or darkness. The value is determined by the amount of light reflected by the surface. The greater amount of light reflected, the lighter the surface. To state the obvious, dark green looks darker than light green. When a picture is reproduced in black and white, value is the only thing we see. Value ranges from the extremes of black and white, with a continuum of infinite shades of gray tones in between. In the image before you, you see a value scale of grays. In fact, it contains 7 shades of gray. When we describe works of art in terms of value, not only do we distinguish their range of grays, but we also characterize their relative lightness and darkness, that is, their value contrast. Value contrast is the degree of difference between the shades of gray. Within each gray square is a circle. Do the circles become darker as they move to the right, or do they only appear to do so? Yes, they only appear to become darker. So why is this? It's because the value contrast becomes greater as we move towards the right. Each circle is exactly the same value. They are equally dark. The center circle appears to be the same as the square. This is because they share the same value, and so therefore there is no value contrast. Value can also be associated with color. Red can still be red, but it can be lighter or darker, or in other words, different values of color. The gradual shading from light to dark through a successive gradation of tones across a surface is called chiaroscuro. In this diagram, we can see how the gradual shifting from light to darker reds can create the illusion of roundness. Artists can produce the illusion of 3D on a 2D surface by using many gradations of value, chiaroscuro. For example, in Lassus, Pierre-Paul Prud'hon, we see a young woman seated. It almost looks like a photograph. Prud'hon created the illusion of rounded surfaces by using black and white chalk to depict light gradually dissolving into shade. Another term to describe this 3D effect is modeling.